Alrighty, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our August, I almost said September, not yet, our August session of the Volunteer Engagement Webinar Series. We are super excited to have Susan with us again. She spoke a few months ago and has been so gracious enough to share her time and expertise with us on the art of managing up. I do want to do a quick reminder that we are recording, so we encourage everyone to use the chat box to join in the discussion, or even at times we can, take ourselves off of mute and have that conversation. But we want to keep it, general. Don't call anybody out unless it's positive. I mean, we always want to call out the positive stuff, right? But also, just to kind of, if you would do me a favor and make sure everyone's on mute, I will be controlling that just to reduce background noise to respect our speaker. And if you don't want to have your face infamously recorded on YouTube, you can turn your camera off, or we would love to also see you smile as well. So whatever you are comfortable with. So again, thank you everyone for joining us. Good morning. And Susan, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you so much again for being with us. We really appreciate it.
Well, happy to be here. This is a topic that I truly believe in. I've been doing this webinar for many years now, and the biggest hint or best hint I can tell you is you can manage up at work and at home. Both the technique has benefited me in many ways in both places. So think of it as how this can even improve your life. But anyways, welcome. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Susan Sano, CVA, Certified Volunteer Administrator, and I'm with Volunteer Fairfax, the Volunteer Center here in the Washington metropolitan area, and we work in Northern Virginia. We are about to turn 50 years old, I think in 2 years, 1 year, soon it's happening. But thank you so much. We do about one training a week, about 3 to 4 trainings a month, and we've been in this mode since March 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic. I thought, hey, we can do them once a week. That'll, be good for a few months, not knowing that this would change my life. And here we are 2.5 years later. But so we've answered the opening question about your favorite boss. Now let's flip it and let's think about your least favorite boss. Feel free to put the words in the chat area if you want to put them there, or put yourself on, let your microphone speak, and you can say what your least favorite boss, one word.
I'm going to unmute myself just because I don't know how to spell this word. But stifling?
Yes, STIF. I don't know what happens after that. So speaking that one is great. Any other ideas? And Sydney, if you can share those with me, because I'm not opening up that chat area.
Sure. We have micromanager, controlling, inflexible, uncooperative, a lot of micromanaging coming in. I think
Um,
there's at least 3 or 4 of those.
yeah, terse, terse. Have you, no. Can we
Tech
talk about
challenge.
challenged,
Tech.
unchallenged,
Tech.
tech challenged? Yeah, yeah. That's one of those when you have a change in leadership and they say, send it to me. Can you send it in a zip file? And you're thinking, the other person didn't even know what a zip file. Yeah. So it can really help move things around or move things along in a positive way.
Unapproachable was another one that came in as well.
Yes. And if sometimes if they're having sad issues at home, something else is going on in their life, and they're bringing it to work, that can make it really, really difficult. Yeah, there's lots of negatives, but this is the beauty about this question about the positive and the negative. Just this morning, I was looking at my LinkedIn page, and I love this when employees stay when they are, and thinking about our question about what do you like most and what you like least. What do you like most about a boss? When you are recognized, when you're included, valued, energized, heard, trusted, promoted, paid well, and appreciated. And I look at that whole thing, and from our point of view, maybe paid well isn't in the possibilities. I always say I may not be paid well, but if the maximum raise that's being given is 3%, I want 3%. I want, whatever the most is for our job, so it's not within reason. Of course, everybody wants their salary doubled, tripled, et cetera. It's not going to happen. But as long as I'm paid well and acknowledged and recognized and promoted and heard and all these other words, and it's like, yeah, this is going to help me today. So, like I said, just this morning, this was on my LinkedIn page. So thinking about managing up, what's it really all about? It's a lot of different things at a lot of different times for a lot of different people. It can be a way to lead. It can also be a way to follow, to be led by your boss. It can be a way that you're communicating with your boss, with your volunteers, with the people who work for you or volunteer for you. It's a way to make yourself valuable to the organization, to the staff, to yourself, to your boss. It can make yourself indispensable. I know more about a good Excel spreadsheet and I'm always able to help you. That's a gold mine for me. It could be a way to succeed. You're planning to succeed. You can also plan to fail, meaning that it's not going to be going right, but you're going to use this as a learning opportunity and a lesson for next time. Many times it's just a personal attitude adjustment. What your expectations, what's going to happen when you bring this idea or start this new program? What are you going to do personally? How is it making you feel and what adjustments do you have to make? Maybe it's something negative going on and it's just a way to survive. And then sometimes it can just be office politics. It's just the culture and the organization. And this term that I've learned to really appreciate and how I use my managing up skills is influence without authority. There are entire books written using that title and that idea. But how am I going to use my position in the organization to improve the number of volunteers, improve the volunteer experience, let that volunteer voice be heard in organizational planning? So I don't have the title of executive director or chief operating officer, but as a director of volunteers, manager of volunteers, coordinator of volunteers, what can I do to build my voice to influence the health of the organization or the department? So when I'm talking about managing up, let's look at it in two ways. Managing up, it's that building that successful working relationship with the superiors, the managers, the employers, the people who make sure that your paycheck is given to you or deposited in your account on a regular basis. Those are the people who you're managing up to. The managing down is people who work with volunteers. It's building that successful working relationship, whether it's employees who are paid or those unpaid volunteers. So as volunteer leaders, love this picture because I think it represents where we are. We are both. We are needing to manage up to our boss and that we always, by that we do, we are managing down as well. I've stared at this picture for what seems like hours, years. I still don't know if the cat is going up or down the stairs. So the place I recommend to start is knowing yourself. It's, what do you need? What are you like to work with? What do you need to succeed? Do you need an entire staff getting behind you and supporting you in everything you do? Or are you the kind of person that you need to work on your own and then you'll bring it to the organization, say, okay, we have a new program? What happens to you when you fail? Do you become sad and depressed and say, I'm never doing that again? Or are you going to pick yourself up, and start all over again and saying, okay, next year we're going to do better. Or next month at the next volunteer orientation, we're going to do better. I tried something new. I took a risk. It didn't really work, or it worked great and we're going to build on that. Where in the development process, and by development, I'm saying program development, where do you or when do you ask for help? When do you need it? Are you in the at the very beginning? You need somebody to talk it through to make sure you're setting a good foundation, or in the process, or after you're done and you're thinking, that went horrible. I should have had this person help me 6 months ago. When people give you feedback, what does that look like to you? Is your boss going to come in and say, let me tell you what I thought of that program? Or are they going to be a lot more subtle? Gee, when I did the program 5 years ago, this is what I did. Or they may come and say, that was rotten. I hated that program. Why did you do that? Well, all kinds of feedback can come in so many different ways of communication, but what does it look like to you and how does it feel to you? Are you saying I'm ready to do this again, or I just, I tried it. We tried this theme for the volunteer recognition day and that was horrible. I don't know if we'll even have one next year. And you're really taking it personally? Are you taking it professionally? And how does it feel to you? Is it a way to go forward or is it a way to halt? So I want to share what I think is some of my best motherly advice, and the reason I call it motherly advice. I, honest to goodness, gave this to my daughter when she was in when she was in high school. I picked her up one day and she told me about a situation, and she was just a teacher was just overpowering her, and I said, look, everybody's got an agenda. This teacher is brand new. He's trying to prove himself. So everybody has an agenda. Once you understand that person's agenda, your life might become easier or even more manageable. So thinking about, why are they giving you this kind of advice? What are they saying about this? Because what is their pressure? What is their world in front of them? If they've been told you need to increase the number of volunteers you're retaining, and you've come in and said, gosh, we've just lost another 10 people have asked to go off of our roster, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, this is one of their program goals, this is one of your program goals, and you realize that this becomes something bigger than just you and your world. So everybody has an agenda. That's the one that works well both at home and at work. So bad news, surprise, everybody has a boss. You may think you're the only one, but think of who your boss's boss is, or your boss's boss's bosses, or if your boss is the executive director, if you're the executive director, the boss is your board of directors. Everybody has a boss. So it's important to understand where they are, what's their agenda, what are their hot buttons. I had a boss who loved finance, so you always had to put things in terms of dollar amounts, what we were gaining, what was our higher return on investment. Another boss could like surveys, so you may have to come to them with some data from recent surveys that you do more often because you know your boss really likes that. What kind of communication do you want with them, and how do they handle communications with you? Are you looking for every few minutes to hear from them saying, oh, here's a new idea? Or do you want to meet with them once a week? Do you want them to write a memo to you, call you on the phone, text you? Or my favorite with a former boss of mine was what I called doorway, in the door, leaning on the door frame and say, have you heard? She did great with those. She liked those. So it was important for me to fold that into my managing up, how I best talking to her. I have a boss now who I once sent about 5 or 6 emails in one day. She told me to never do that again. And I since have stopped, and I really watch how many times I'll email her in a certain day. She did not want that daily communication. Are you the kind of person who generally talks positive or negative? What's gone right, what's gone wrong? And again, going back to your boss's hot buttons should help guide you on how to frame a situation. Are you communicating your successes when something goes well? What do you say? How do you say it? Some people say, well, I don't want to just go there and say all good things about me. Well, you can put it in a way that this is a success for the organization. This is what's enabling us and placing us in a position to go these 2 or 3 steps down the road. They can see that it's you. You don't have to remind them, but it's, how you're communicating. Also communicating your failures, where you've stumbled, where things didn't go as expected. You thought you were going to have 30 volunteers show up for this event, but you only had 20 because you're seeing a pattern now that every time people are signing up, about a 2/3 show up and 1/3 don't. Well, then, they keep not showing up. So instead of expecting 30, I'm now going to expect 20 and assume how many people are no longer going to show up, even though they've registered. Are you proactively making sure that you're allowing people to ask questions? Are you going around during a volunteer day and asking people for how's it going? What kind of feedback? Did you get everything you needed? Are we doing things well, right? Just informal feedback, and then you can have formal survey tools as well. Thinking about what you can take off your boss's plate, and it's a great way to manage up. So if you see your boss overwhelmed with something, I have to write a letter to the editor and I don't want to write a letter to the editor. Say, can I take a crack at it? Can I try it? Let me, give you at least an outline, something that really can show off your writing skills, that they may have forgotten that you have strong writing skills. So think about something to take off your boss's plate. If there's a major meeting coming up and they're being overwhelmed, let them know that you can handle the volunteers at the program, or let me get that volunteer ask out so you can get the process moving. So bad news for everybody. Sorry to, there we go. Move that box. So really bad news. Your boss is never going to change. And I think that's what wraps us up as employees, is that you just are hoping for that person to change. And it's not going to happen, but it's how to proceed after that when you realize, okay, how am I going to deal with this? Best advice to start with on this is don't just deliver problems. So you don't go to your boss and say, I don't know what's happened. We usually get 30 volunteers on a Saturday and only 20 showed up this week. And then stop there. We only had 20 people show up on Saturday. We usually get 30. What I think I'm going to do is now plan for 20, but also accept more people into volunteering that day, maybe up the number to 40. So you're going to allow for more no-shows. Does that work for you? So what you've shown your boss is that you can identify the problem, but you can also say, here are a couple options. What do you think? Do you think that that would work? And they may say yes, they may say no, but you're making them part of the team and you're helping them understand that there's a problem, but you've got it. You've got that one under control. So thinking about your role in volunteer management, as a volunteer director, manager, coordinator, we're bosses too. So what skills do you have to manage your volunteering team? And it could be your volunteering team is filled with volunteers. What do you have? Do you have that ability to organize? Do you have that ability to communicate your needs? Do you have your ability to project manage? What do you have? What skills do you still need to better manage your team? Identifying the number of people you need for a particular project. Maybe you're not so good at that now and you need to work on it. What do you do as a boss? What do you do when you see a success? Do you walk up to that person right then and there and say, terrific job, that was great? Or do you walk up to them and say, oh, thanks for being here today? Or if you're seeing a failure, do you call them out? Do you say, here's how we can do it better? This is how I can do it better. It makes a real difference. But think about what kind of boss you want to be, because you're somebody's boss as well. So any kinds of problems, I always recommend that you, when you're facing a challenge, that you break it down. You think of what is the problem? So again, going back to that person's agenda, is it the agenda that's the problem, or what are they really saying versus what the problem is in front of you? It's if we're doing a volunteer project and the supplies that were promised were not there. So the problem isn't somebody did something wrong that you're looking at. My guess is the problem was in the planning process and who's doing the planning. You might be part of the problem, but you can also think about how to do this better next time around. Who is the source of pointing out that this is a problem? Is it self-selected, or has your boss told you, or have your team of volunteers go, why is there no water for today? It's hot outside. We needed water. I was, this is something that's affecting them personally, as opposed to your boss saying, I hear there was no water at the project. That is a severe risk for the organization to, we need to care for their health in this very hot weather. They start thinking lawsuit. And you're thinking lawsuit. I just want to make sure people showed up and the numbers were right. So what direction have you been given? You were told there would be water on site, so you didn't have to worry about it. So you can go back to figure out where the breakdown happened. Who is your boss for this issue? In this case, your boss are your volunteers, because they're expecting to be taken care of, their good health for this project. It's outside and it's hot outside. What is their agenda? Why are they saying these things? My example, very obvious. It can be something more subtle. Maybe they're trying out this program to bring in a new batch of volunteers in the fall. So their agenda is to see how it goes. And think about any challenge and who it's going to affect, how it's going to affect the impact for your whole organization. Are people going to say, oh, your organization, great place to volunteer. They always know what they're doing. Or what a mess it was when I walked in. They were very disorganized and I don't want to go volunteer there again. Anybody have any questions on this or any of the other things we've already been talking about?
No questions come into the chat box, but I had a question for you, more of an advice thing, I suppose. So everyone's definitely has different ways of communicating. Like you, I'm a big emailer. I love those paper trails. People like legal don't like paper trails. And it is to the point where, we'll have the face-to-face conversation, but if they have I don't remember having that conversation. Well, that's why I like a paper trail.
Yeah, so
Do you have any tips or tricks on how to kind of mediate that?
so sure, it's managing yourself on this. So if somebody doesn't like that paper trail or it's that doorway conversation, I go like this because it's like I'm standing in that doorway. Take notes and type up your notes and keep a log of what happened, especially if you think it's going to become a legal issue, or if it's something that you want to revisit. Why did I say that? Oh, right. And those notes are going to remind you. So it's notes for yourself, not notes that you have to share with a boss. Does that help?
Yes, thank you very
Okay.
much.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's thinking about taking care of yourself on this, but also taking care of others. Some people like those texts. Some people say, no, the texts are too intrusive. You're texting my home phone number and I don't need to know this at 2 in the morning when you're thinking, oh, I forgot to tell her or him, and you start texting. Figure out where the line is drawn. This is really important for vacation time as well. When you're doing some managing up, I mean, if you win a major award, I'm going to go ahead and tell my boss that. I don't care where he or she is. I'm texting right away. But if there's a problem with the access to the bathrooms at the project site today, I'm not texting my boss about that because they can't do anything for me. So think about what their superpower is for the day.
And if I may just interject along this same line of thinking, there should be a standing appointment for ongoing coaching and development between the boss and the subordinate staff. That's a great time to highlight. She's
That's
clapping.
a great, yeah, an excellent practice. Excellent. I have that with one of my bosses right now, and it's wonderful. And I actually, this is my method. I go through Post-its like crazy. If I have a question for my boss, remember this is the one I doesn't like me to email her a lot. I write it down on a Post-it, and I have a paper calendar. I'm a little retro on this, but this is why. I want to remember what that question is, write it down, and then I put it on the date of our standing meeting. So when I walk into our standing meeting, again, this is managing up. I have my list of 6 Post-its. And I know what, I'll say, back last, towards the end of July, we had a problem with so and so. I wrote it down. So let's talk about it now. It didn't need, I didn't need it solved every single day, but what kind of policy or how should I approach this in going forward? What's a way to solve the problem? That's one of my boss's great um, um, uh, leadership traits that I adore, that if I need something solved, I can go to her and she's going to help me figure out who to talk to, how to solve it, how to get some money for it, that kind of thing. So yeah, the monthly meeting is an absolute managing up. I go in there with my stack of Post-its. I actually go over those Post-its before I walk in, put them in the order that I want to ask the questions, bunch them together if I kept asking the same thing over and over again. And then my favorite is toss a few out if it's like, well, it seemed like it was important on January 3rd, not so important on February 3rd, so we don't need to talk about it. So that's how I deal with those monthly meetings, because I think it is an incredibly strategic managing up opportunity.
And if those monthly meetings are not scheduled, don't you encourage to manage up in a way to ask for a meeting?
Sure. Yeah, and if they say, oh, I want it to be, just sort of a little bit more spontaneous, and you can say, I'd really rather have it be a set meeting. Can we do the second Tuesday of every month or the third Friday or whatever day of the week is right for them? Some of them are better on Mondays and worse on Fridays or vice versa. So that's the getting to know your boss and what the hot buttons are. If your boss comes in every Monday with, what do I do for a living? I forgot what everything that's going on. That's probably not the best time to talk to him or her. But stay in control. If they say, I definitely want it to be spontaneous, you in your mind every month use your Post-its, put it in the week that you want to meet. I don't know what kind of lead time that they want to set a meeting, but if it's, we'll talk, on Monday, I will email you, can we meet sometime this week? Wednesday mornings or Thursday afternoons? Which would be better for you? Last time we met on a Friday morning, I could do that as well. So retaining some control. And this also shows some drive. A lot of managing up comes back to praise you during your evaluations because you're taking the initiative, you're looking to, define the problems, figure out how to solve them, giving some alternatives, lots of things that we're talking about today, but it's a really good point that I usually don't talk about in these presentations, so it's an excellent idea. So let's think about some other things having to do with managing up. Thinking about where the concept and idea and people who are your volunteers, what does your organization think about volunteerism? Are they very supportive? Are they very excited? Or do they think that they hold the organization back? We learned a lot of lessons about how we feel about volunteers and organization. We used to talk about what would your organization do without volunteers if they all disappeared? Well, in many organizations, they did disappear during the pandemic by our choice, our request. So hopefully you can continue to make that message known in your organization that you missed them during the pandemic. You are thrilled that they are back, and hopefully the other people who you're interacting are giving you that same kind of message. Are you using your data power to make everybody volunteer smart? Are you collecting statistics? So, as leaders of volunteers, it's up to us to collect that knowledge. So we knowing our stats and then sharing the stats and advocating for our volunteers because of those statistics. Do you know off the top of your head the number of volunteers you have, the number of volunteer hours they give a week, a month, a year? How long does a typical volunteer stay with your organization? At Volunteer Fairfax, we have about 6 in-office volunteers. The number of years they've given to our organization is close to 100. That's because some of our in-office volunteers have served us over 25 years. Two men who are retired, and this is how they've been using the retirement years, but I always love to calculate the number of years that they've been serving in total, and it's a story to tell. What's the length of your longest serving volunteer versus your brand new volunteer? Maybe the similarities are between the two people, or the differences could be part of a story. A way a volunteer or a group of volunteers have made an impact on your organization. And the stat that is probably the greatest challenge to calculate, but also quite telling, what percentage of your organization's work is done by volunteers? So does anybody have any other stats that they want to suggest as a good collection point to tell the story of impact of volunteers?
Number of people served? That kind of goes
Yes.
with work done by volunteers a little bit, but maybe a specific number like that.
Right. There is, and I'm sorry I don't have it, but the group Independent Sector does an annual survey or annual dollar value of volunteers by the hour. The national rate is just under $30. So if you calculated the number of hours versus $30 an hour, you're going to have a number to share to people. Did you know the value of our volunteers is, $647,000 worth of volunteering? That's a wow. So, collecting these stats are one thing, but using the stats, using the stories that you're getting from your statistics, from your data points. So using your managing up powers for good, where can you share these stats? And you can share them with your colleagues, board members. If there's a board meeting coming up, great time to say, can you include this in their agenda just to let them know? Newsletters, that kind of things. And it can be for board, staff, colleagues, people who are recipients of the program. Did you know that we have 432 volunteers annually, and they give the average 10 hours a week, and that equals that kind of dollar amount. Not good at math. Also with other volunteers, it's important for them to understand the size and scope of your volunteer program. I am an usher at a local theater, and I always thought, wow, this is great being an usher, me and 50 other people. I come to find out, no, it's not 50 people. I just guessed. There were 800 volunteers before the pandemic. I now know that there are 600 volunteers. We lost a couple in that they decide, a couple hundred in that they decide not to return to volunteering. But it was like, okay, I'm really part of something much greater than I could ever have imagined. Where else can you share the stats? Your newsletter, blog, website, that kind of thing. You have control of your own email and email signature. Think about what you're putting there. That is an absolute free space for you. So if you have a stat that would, people would stop going, wow, I did not know that. That's where you put it. If you are going to go out on vacation or out for a few days, put a stat on your out of office message. Use those communications vehicle as a way to manage up, to inform people of the impact of volunteers on your organization. Depending whether you're in an office or not, post a fact of the day, fact of the week, fact of the month outside your cubicle or on your door or in the office reception area, a little 8.5 by 11, piece of plexiglass. You can have a stat of the month, September stat. Your September volunteer stat tells us that we will have more new volunteers this month than we do at any time during the rest of the year. So be on the lookout. And here's our 10 new volunteers for them. You can give more information. If you have a volunteer message center, break room, you can post stats there, and then also include the statistics on any of your volunteer recruitment materials. Not knowing what I was walking into gave me a real sense of accomplishment. I also had to wait 3 years to be accepted as a volunteer, so I was very patient. So it's been worth it. Whoops. What is the essential answer for everyone connected with your organization? I feel like I'm playing Jeopardy. How does someone begin as a volunteer? That is the message that as the leader of volunteers, that you need to make sure everybody in the organization knows the answer. Go to the website. My favorite that I like to build, and again, this is part of my managing up technique, is if somebody wants to volunteer, email Susan, call Susan, ask for Susan. Here's her email address. Here, reach out to her. She will take care of you. I'm trying to build my persona for with everybody in the organization. So anytime they run into anybody who might be interested in volunteering, but don't know where to begin, be the person that they should contact to get the ball rolling. You also are responsible for responding to these, but as somebody who's dealing with volunteers and volunteerism, that is part of our responsibility. But building that persona, the identity throughout your organization, you want everybody on your board to know that when they run into people in their work that that may want to volunteer, you're the contact to get things going, and then be responsible for that. Think about who your internal volunteerism advocate is. Who's going to speak up for volunteers, whether you're doing your annual gala, developing a budget, looking at the career the organization for your for you. The organizational diagram for your organization. What does that look like? Who's going to speak out for you? Know where your internal advocate is. It could be your supervisor, but it also might be that the executive director, CEO, if it's a different person, it very often could be a board member, especially a board member or a donor, anybody who came up the volunteer ranks and maybe still volunteers once a week. So they're still getting that point of view of the front lines on the ground work. And this is one of my favorite things to share with you because you may or may not have done this before. But when you're doing your volunteer recognition program, always include your leadership in the thank you process. If you're having a informal luncheon, if you're having a happy hour during a National Volunteer Month or whatever month includes your organization, just something to thank volunteers, bring in your boss, bring in your CEO, bring in your board chair, bring in that advocate who's on the board who still wants to be connected to volunteers. They're going to see your volunteers up front, but they're also going to see you as a leader of volunteers in action. So it's a great managing up moment, mutual education with mutual benefits. So what could be your next managing up move? You got to ask yourself some really tough questions. And until you figure this stuff out, you're going to be stuck. Are you currently the best possible employee you can be? I had somebody took this class and she said, no, I'm not. I'm holding back. I'm unhappy with the support, the reaction, I'm not coming up with new ideas anymore. I'm not looking at new ways of reinventing stuff to make it better. I'm not open up to new technology. Are you the best kind of employee you can be? What value do you bring to your boss and your organization? If I'm the whiz at all Excel spreadsheets, I'm willing to help everybody anytime, any place, any point in my organization. I'm happy to look at it, bringing real value to your organization. Are you part of the organization's bench strength? Is there something going on in another department, but you could help? If you could say, I'm not part of finance, but I'm happy to go over the stats with you as you're doing your check before the audit. That's part of looking at a grander organization, and you can play a role in it. Determine how to best talk to your boss. The person who didn't like the emails. She's okay with a couple of texts, so sometimes I try to mix it up. Or the in the doorway, holding up the door frame kind of conversations. They're still some of my absolute favorites. And then thinking about what does a managing up or managing down conversation really look like? So managing up, hello boss, there is a problem. We had a volunteer orientation session on last night. I was expecting 30 people. We had 20 and 5 people came in a half an hour late. And 2 people thought it was a virtual meeting, so they didn't show up. So what I'm thinking is now offering this one on Tuesday nights, but also one on Saturday mornings, and that one will be virtual. So we would juggle both kinds of trainings. And so do you think that would work? And they would tell you what that means to them. They thinking every week you're going to be doing that. No, we're going to do this once a week and offer 2 different options. Okay, so that's the plan. We'll try that. It's now middle of August. Why don't we try it for the next 4 months? And then after the first of the year, we'll see how it's going. And going back to you've agreed upon a plan of action. And earlier I said, you've taken notes, write an email, send it back to your boss, let him know that or her know that this is what we've decided upon. I love we did this in September. It really worked well. I can't wait to see what October brings. It's a managing up time because what you're doing is something worked well and I can tell you about it, but I'm not telling you as I did this right. I think we're onto something. It worked once, so let's see if it can work again. And that's as much as you need to tell them. And send a thank you note to your supervisor for the conversation as part of that plan of action, letting them know that they're being appreciated, they're being heard, and remember the reasons why you like a boss and not like a boss, it goes both ways. And then thinking about a managing down conversation, high valuable volunteer. There seems to be a problem. You're here a couple of days a week and you've been coming in late you're on time on Tuesday, late on Thursdays. Thursday is a peak day of our work and we have a lot of things going on that day and we need somebody here at the front desk. I know this is important because this is part of our strategic plan. So what Tuesdays are good. Do you just want to continue on Tuesdays or do you need to take a break for Thursdays or do you want to just stop Thursdays altogether and in 2 weeks we'll find somebody new and so what do you think of that? And they'll say, no, I think I just want to stick with Tuesdays. And I didn't know how to tell you that I didn't want to do Thursdays because I'm taking a swim class now every Thursday morning. So, you thank them for the conversation, you write up what had happened, you write that back to them, and of course, thank them to thank them as a volunteer and how much you appreciate all that they've given. And, should something change, the door remains open. We always could use you, more than one day a week. Tuesdays are great. There's 5 other days during the week and we'll be open to talking to you. So it's a very positive managing down conversations, but you get what you're looking for, you get clarity and figure out if there's something you need to solve and then give a game plan, a calendar of how it's going to be solved. So let's think about building your managing up skills. Learn to lead. Learn to lead and continue to lead and lead as well as seeing what it's like to lead as well as what it's like to follow. Be a committee member, be a committee chair, see what the differences are. Learn to mentor. You're going through this learning process now. Think about who's next, who's behind you that would like to learn some of these skills. If somebody keeps coming and to tell you to identify that there's a problem, you need to say to them, I can see that this room is just a mess from the last group of people. So what can we do to keep this from happening again? And so you need to teach them that let's reach out to the group that used this meeting last evening and let them know, please, bring the chairs as you found them or stack them in the corner, and it's helpful for the next meeting. If you're needing more information on how decision-making happens, both in strategy and actions, help prepare for a meeting. It could be a board meeting, it could be a committee meeting, it could be another volunteer meeting run by somebody else. Ask to support a committee to build that meetings management skills. In fact, I have a whole webinar just on skills for successful meetings management. And I think that that's such a great skill, whether you work with volunteers or not. If you say to yourself, but I don't have a committee, there's no committees that are reporting to me, you can make a volunteer advisory committee and make that your working group in learning how to better manage meetings. And finally, I ask that you consider becoming a certified volunteer administrator. You have to have been working in volunteer management at least 3 years. There are some hoops to jump through, some points to make sure that you're qualified, to the stuff in your background is right, but it's a way to build recognition to others that you are, you know your stuff and that you've passed the test and you can become a CVA. Any questions, and especially on building your managing up skills?
Nothing has come into the chat box. I will make a comment real quick on the CVA. And Susan, I think you'll find this exciting, but we have a study group for the CVA in Tennessee, and we have about 8 or 9 people. And I think at least 1 or 2 are going to sit for the exam in October, and everyone else is kind of feeling it out, you know, getting the studying under their belt. But we have 3 CVAs in the Tennessee Aging Network, and we're hoping to continue to increase that number every year.
Excellent work. And can I ask, how long has your study group been meeting?
So we started in April of 2021 because I took the exam in April 2020 and didn't pass my first time because I can do this on my own. I don't need any help. And it turns out I needed a whole lot of help. So we did it in April 2021, October 2021, and we're doing it, we started in July. So we skipped early this spring, but we've done it 3 times in the last 2 years.
Well, and thank you for clarifying how long. I just got a message just the other day from somebody who I'm mentoring in life or in volunteer management career. She said, I'm still looking for a study group. And I'm thinking, it's end of August. So I'm trying to let her know that it does take a while. It's not an easy test just because some of these ideas, things that you're being tested on are stuff that we haven't been trained to do that language. I think in terms of volunteer ethics, that was totally new to me, and you had to figure out how to answer the questions. And right, I certainly didn't do it on my own. I had a study buddy, and the funniest part was we both took the test and both got the exact same score. We studied together, took the test separately, both passed, but oh my goodness, we really did learn the same stuff or something, or we missed the same stuff. But yes, I think it's a great way to also to network with other people looking to make a statement about their career. So that's why I think it's part of a managing up skill. So let's do some scenario work and we can see how it goes and see how when we put it all together, what it really is looking like. So first scenario, lucky Alex. Alex managed to turn her college internship into her very first job. For the past 3 years, she has been the volunteer coordinator for My Best Friends Are Animals. She's responsible for over 400 volunteers. She has come up with some new ideas to train and streamline the scheduling process. She's kept her team engaged throughout the pandemic's work at home orders. They are coming back at, ready to go, ready to work, but the staff still looks at her as just the intern. So let's think about this. Name something Alex should do to manage up and be treated like the professional volunteer manager she is. You're free to unmute yourself and answer that.
I'm just over here talking away, but I'm on mute, so that doesn't help. I think going back to your kind of statistics and sharing that data, that sounds like something they may not, and of course we don't know the whole story, but that's something that they may not have that she created. And it's, hey, I've been here 3 years and look at all this progress that we've made.
Absolutely. That's where that, right, using that data in your signature, in that sign in the reception area, in a newsletter, they may not realize that that you have retained 94% of your volunteers pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. That's awesome. Or you may have 50% of what you had before the pandemic. So that means you're really pushing volunteer recruitment. It lets them know what you're doing, why you're doing, and the impact it makes on your organization. I gave a clue past 3 years. That means she's eligible to sit for her CPA. So that's what I would recommend her to do.
We also had a comment come in, have a meeting with all volunteers to have an in-service to update on their impact and the volunteer, like a mini volunteer appreciation or social hour.
And telling those stats, that message, in a volunteer management or volunteer program annual report. Put out a report each year and let the world know. And the world means you, your staff, your boss, your board, your donors, what the impact of volunteers make on your organization. Depending on if you have a development director, somebody who's raising money, they will be very happy if you start thinking in terms of this, because you're going to be giving them data and impact information. Let's look at a next scenario. Well, I thought it was a success. The gala was over the weekend. It was a big success. You oversaw a team of 30 volunteers. They staffed the registration, silent auction, and coat check. And as the volunteer manager for the team, you walked out from the event totally exhausted, but very proud of the team. My boss felt to otherwise. I received an email from her at 7 p.m. on Sunday evening. There were some major problems with your volunteers. I want to see you as soon as you arrive on Monday. So what would you do to prepare for this meeting? And I'm sorry. Well, we think we've done a great job.
Susan, I think there are several things that could happen here. There's definitely a wide perspective on what the organization sees the success of volunteers, as well as what the actual volunteers are doing, or the person who's managing the volunteers. So I don't think that in the number one scenario, in this scenario, that management has bought into the value of the volunteer program. So we may have a polarity issue here. So there's
absolutely. And well, the question I ask is, what does success look like? And you go into it going, okay, success will be, I had 30 volunteers. That's
right.
How many we are looking for. We were sufficiently covered in registration, silent auction, and coat check. Check, check, check. We had 25 out of 30 volunteers say, oh, I can't wait to do this next year. So perhaps you've collected some data. You've either done a verbal check. How did it go? Do you want to do it next year? Or maybe a quick written check. I noted that this was done at 7 p.m. on Sunday evening, this nasty email. You still have time for doing some outreach to your volunteer crew and collect some data. And I start thinking about, what do you think the major problem was? My guess is a donor didn't like something. Maybe it was in the silent auction. Maybe it was you didn't thank them profusely, or you pushed the tip jar at the coat check, or something that happens. But line up what the expectations were for you and your program, how it was met, what you learned from the successes, what you learned from the failures, and realize that, my guess, there was one cranky person who chewed the ear of your executive director. And that's what you have to deal with and say, okay, so next year we will not allow a tip jar. That seems reasonable at an event like this, something like that. But remember, you're responsible for your data, And that's the best way to fight it. And what does success look like? And who spoke out? It's usually somebody cranky, somebody who didn't get it.
And another important point, you can't undermanage and expect certain results.
Very good.
And it looks as though maybe management did undermanage and was expecting something different, but was there check-in along the way with the
Right.
volunteer staff as with the person who's managing?
Yeah.
Were they being supported? Did they feel like that they had all the resources that they need for success at the level that the leadership was or the boss was expecting?
Right. We trained our volunteers at the silent auction at 8 or at 10 p.m. at the end of the event. You take those. You don't let anybody else continue to write on them because that's the end. And maybe that person got ticked off because you instructed this person, your volunteer, that this is how we're running the auction. And maybe the person wasn't happy. So what are your rules? Did they follow those rules? Did they go rogue and make their own rules?
Exactly.
That's our responsibility as volunteer managers to make sure our volunteers are taught the correct process. And some of these things might be tough. Like I said, if in a silent auction, you've told them you lift up those the sheets of paper at 10 p.m. I know that when I'm going to an event with a silent auction, I hover. So at 9:59, I'm writing down my bid. I get stuff, but it's you have to have the people on your side, and your boss needs to realize that you train these people to do it this way. And if they don't like it, you're going to do better next year. How should it be changed? Let's work on this together. That we could end it at 9:45, or we could give people more notice that you only have 30 minutes, 15 minutes, 5 minutes before the end of this, whatever the problem was. It's always something, there's always someone.
We did have a couple comments come in. I
Yes,
want to make
please.
so kind of just to summarize everything that we've talked about, they're really good points. Be prepared to share on the positive things that happened and find out what did go wrong and plan to resolve the problems and how to be better in the future, and definitely debrief after an event to get that feedback. I think that kind of sums up everything in a nice little bow that was talked about.
Absolutely. Well, let's look at scenario number 3. This is one of my favorites, and I'll tell you why in a moment. The former volunteer manager of the Show Must Go On Theater used to read from the notebook at the podium for the annual 2+ hour volunteer usher orientation / refresher session. It was dull, it was dark, it was boring, and it was also required. So when you took over as volunteer manager 8 months ago, you revamped it all. You ran your new orientation last week, and you ran your new orientation last week for the very first time, and it was a hit. You even got a standing ovation. This is a true story, and this is why I like to include it, because it's like, no, I didn't make this one up. This is an absolute truth. So how would you communicate this major overhaul and star-making performance with your boss, and then also be communicated with your staff as well as your board of directors?
I think in the planning process, it would be cool to have a volunteer that went through that 2-hour dull training and ask, hey, I know you've been through this before. I've revamped it. I'm hoping that I'm going to get a better reaction from you. Would you mind, or a group attending? And then instead of us sharing, because we're always going to say that we're amazing and everything was great, but if they hear it from, okay, this is how it was and this is how it is, and having that volunteer perspective, I think maybe help, especially to your boss and your board.
And one of the things when we're training volunteers going through their orientation refresher, how many do you turn into actual volunteers, or how many do you lose, or how many decide to quit? What are those numbers looking like now that you have energized this training? And long story very short, because remember, this is true from probably about 5 years ago to now. It's now done on Zoom. So my guess is that their participation numbers are way up because people don't have to leave their house to go and sit in a theater for 2 hours, and they're able to do this, as a Zoom meeting online as opposed to have to be in the theater for 2 hours. Oh, it was terrible. They would give us food, but there would be like 400 people going to one table. It was a mess. It was an absolute mess. But what else could you tell? How can you report this to your boss? And then your boss can report to her boss, et cetera, et cetera.
I would have liked to seen a testimonial, maybe via video with this standing ovation, a
Really?
newsletter or something that you can put on the website and everyone can see it.
Right. And it's not, you're making it about you, but you're making it for the good of the organization. Our volunteer crew is energized for the new season. And we want you to know that we trained 500 out of our 600 volunteers. And this is what we're doing looking ahead. And, you know, you can even have fun with it. You mentioned a video. I'm thinking make it into a little newspaper, extra, read all about it, that kind of thing. So you've made it's a star-making performance on the on the new volunteer manager site, manager's point of view, but it's what's been done that's improving your organization as a whole.
Yeah, seeing is believing. If they can see the energy, feel the energy, hear it,
Right.
It's more compelling.
And of course you've surveyed everybody who attended and used some of those testimonials. And again, I think your point is really good. Bring one of your star volunteers in to have them talk to the board to remind them of what it's like to be a volunteer. Maybe that there's a little bit of distance, and to remind them what it's like on the ground.
We did have a comment that came in that just kind of echoes what you just said. Have the volunteers fill out a survey after the training and get those data points and those testimonials for sure.
Absolutely, because you want to know things like, right, how many orientations have you been to in the past? How does this one change? What do you remember most? What were you most surprised that was included? What are state whether you agree or disagree. I am proud to be a volunteer at this organization. Then, of course, a why. So let's think about making that leap that you're gonna launch a volunteer advisory committee, giving yourself an opportunity to lead and manage a committee. You've drafted the charter, you've developed a 22-23 work plan for the next year and a half, and you have a possible 5 people in mind for your VAC, for your volunteer advisory committee. You've discussed it with your favorite volunteer, Jordan, most reliable, insightful volunteer. And the person has indicated that they are interested in sharing the effort. And because Jordan mentioned that they would be interested in serving on the organization's board of directors someday, this would be a stepping stone. Your boss said, nope, waste of time, not a fan of a VAC, but is willing, a boss that listens to you, agrees to let you go ahead and try it. And you can do it for the rest of 2022, and let's see where things stand in early 2023. So let's think about, what would you do to recruit members of your volunteer advisory committee? Think about a couple of possible goals you can achieve, and then think about what you would do to prepare for that meeting in January 2023 to turn your doubter into somebody supporting you.
The first thing I think of could be controversial, so I'm curious on your input on this. I'm all about transparency, and I've been told I'm a bit too transparent. There's some things I should probably keep a little closer to the vest. But do you think once you get everything going and you have your members, so I'm kind of skipping to the second one, sorry. When you kind of talk about the goals, do you think it's okay to let those 5 people know, hey, I'm just going to be honest, we got some people who are doing pushback and don't think this is a good idea. I don't know if that's going to motivate them or discourage them, but like I'd kind of, so obviously I'd word it different, but yeah. I'd want to kind of lay that out there on the front end.
So sometimes when you get people together and say, okay, we're on a team and we're going to make goals, and the goal will be something that's unattainable, too grand, a 10-year goal that you don't have any control over the details. So you start thinking smaller. What do you control and what can you achieve. So think about a month goal, a 3-month goal. In this case, an end of year goal. And you need a couple of those, and then some blue sky stuff. A year from now, 2 years from now, 10 years from now, you could say be the ultimate. I think that that's too far, but I would definitely think in terms of, okay, we're here for 4 months. What can we achieve? I would like it to go further. So thinking about what can you do in 2023 that you need to work on now to work towards that for 2023. I would say, I mean, I agree with you that I would also be fairly transparent and let them know we're good until the end of the year. Let's make a difference from now until then. What can we do? So we're going to put together a committee of our orientation review materials that we can do by the end of the year. We do evaluations of all our volunteers in May. That would push us into 2023. And what would you be doing next year to be setting that up? Could run the various timelines. But short term, short S term, short term, and longer term goals would be good, because you want to show your boss at that January 2023 meeting that you are thinking that you're here to stay and that you are gonna you have goals that are beyond January. Sorry if I just answered it myself.
No, not a problem. We did have some comments come in. I have another fellow transparent individual who volunteers love it. Management, not as much. I can relate to that for sure. And then someone said, personally, recruit some of your star volunteers to be on the board. You get this view on volunteerism and what needs to be done and what they see when they're serving, so those boots on the ground. And then have some reachable goals and share the board is a support system to help recruit and promote the cause.
Very much so. I mean, I want my favorite volunteers to be on my volunteer advisory committee, at least for the first 4 months. I want my worker bees, the one who are going to show up and do the stuff, who do they have to be the longest serving volunteers? No, they do not. They can be a varying level of service. Making sure if when you build your volunteer advisory committee, does everybody look the same age, same race, same part of town, same disability? No, you need a wide variety of people. So think about who people are bringing in and who you need to recruit. That's one of the things I think is one of our responsibilities as we're working with volunteers, is to always keep our eye out for a shining star, somebody who is a possible future leader, who knows stuff, who's interested in working on a committee. And you start thinking, they've only been with us since September. Okay, that doesn't work for us. They've only been with us since July and it's August, but I really think that there's something there and they are interested in getting more leadership skills. That might be an excellent person to bring on to the committee. This can really make your imagination soar because there's so many different possibilities. If it's a small project that you've just been wanting to get to, you thought about it during the pandemic, and as soon as the volunteers come back, we want to work on this. This might be a good time to try some new things and bring them in. And yes, have them meet some attainable goals and then have some goals that are going to push people. And meeting with your boss in January, you're going to be lining up your stats, your testimonials, your work plan for 2023, a vision of how this is going to go with an annual calendar. You could make it go so far that they're saying, okay, this is a go. You're making this a working, breathing entity that can impact our organization. And so I see where it's going now. I thought it was just going to be a tea party, just a chance for 5 friends to meet once a month and have dinner together. But no, it's going to be much bigger than that. Okay, last one, last scenario. It's a toughie. At the beginning, your best volunteer, she was prompt, reliable, volunteering star. You saw them as a future team leader and a future trainer. But during the pandemic, things have changed. they were still able to come in the office one day a week, but when they arrived, they were not happy to be there. They arrived late or did not show up at all. They were sullen, tight-lipped, just unresponsive. They got the bare bones of their volunteering assignments done, but then they hurried off. They signed off as soon as the shift was over. You need to talk to the volunteer and thinking about managing up. What are you going to say to the volunteer? And what if the volunteer was 20 years older than you or 20 years younger?
This is a tough one. Of course, you couldn't lead with this one. Come on.
Gotta end with the toughie.
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind for the volunteer who's older is you can tell kind of from your first sentence or first paragraph there that they were a rock star. Like they were motivated, they've done their service, they've put in their time, instead of, saying, okay, I think it's time for you, like a retirement we talked a couple months ago on one of the series, kind of a passing of the torch. We appreciate everything that you've done, and we want to continue your legacy and kind of move it down to the next generation. So the 20 years younger, I'm struggling with, but the 20 years older, we can kind of, they can retire with dignity from the program.
Well, I think the answer is pretty similar, actually. When they're younger, it's the same conversation. Did you get what you wanted out of the volunteering, and that things changed during the pandemic? So maybe with the older volunteer, they needed some place to go. They like to be out of the house. Maybe they don't want to be out of the house anymore. For the younger volunteer, maybe they were looking for something to put on their college application, and they've just completed their college applications and they don't need the great experience anymore. If their needs have changed, let them know. Sometimes, and I mean, I say this about younger volunteers often, they don't know how to leave, but an older volunteer can also not know how to leave. We send this message, you play such an important role and you've made such an impact. They don't know how to tell you that their volunteering experience time has, they want to wrap it up and they didn't know how to leave. So I recommend, and again, this is volunteering up and this is just good volunteer management, is to always let people know that when you want to leave, you can. You may want to leave for 3 months when you're going someplace else. If you're a retiree and you're going someplace warm for the winter, yay. Or it could be somebody who needs to work on something on their college applications this fall. So they don't have time to volunteer, but to give them notice on how to leave as a volunteer. They need to let you know, give you 2 weeks notice, write up anything that they've learned, offer to write a testimonial, come back and speak at an event, whatever you need to do, but to wrap things up, to open up that there's obviously something changing, give them a chance to let you know. Maybe they love working on Tuesdays, hate working on Thursdays. Okay, we can do that. We can work with you on that. There's not many things we can't change as volunteer managers for the volunteer. If they say, but I'd rather be working, I want a job, I'm unemployed, that you can't help with, but you can say, I can be a good reference for you. So, there's an outcome. It's what are they looking for? And maybe there's something else going on in their life you just didn't know about. A lot of things can happen. I think it really comes down to good communications. But it gets really challenging when we start looking at things by generation.
Let me add this, Susan, if I may, again.
Sure.
I think the first thing to do is to seek to understand what happened and paint the picture for the volunteer. This is the situation, this is the behavior, and this is the impact, so that they can have a reference point after we are seeking to understand, and then let them know that what you just suggested, that there are statuses with the level of volunteer. You may want to take a step back and be episodic. You may want to only volunteer when there's an event, and that's fine. Give them options because they may not know that they have them.
Right. They may think that
It's all or nothing.
yeah, and they may think that they're just a volunteer, so there's no value to them. Where
Correct.
we're looking at them that we're saying, oh my goodness, they input all the data of our new clients, and we can't get a client moving forward until this data is entered. And if they stop coming to work, that means somebody else has to do. It's a domino effect, and they're important link to this, to the flow of the organization. And for them not to show up is really hurting us, and to let them know. So the solution isn't the always you must show up for your slot. It's let's give you some more variables. Let's give you some
Right.
more for some more loosey goosey room to figure out what's right for you. Just,
And
you know,
yeah,
let's try it one day a week from now until November. You'll be gone through the holidays. We'll see you in January, and we can reevaluate then.
yeah.
And you'll get a
If we
you'll
don't
get a Christmas card.
if we don't connect the dots for them, they'll connect them for themselves.
Yeah, and it might be the right dots or the wrong dots.
Correct.
Yeah, so choose the dots, manage up. That's part of our job. Any other ideas on this?
A couple comments came in. So for the 20 year older, find out if they are interested in volunteering or if their season is up or this doesn't meet their interest anymore. And then for younger, sit down and find out how we can meet their expectations or volunteer assignment. Do they have other interests? So I think very similar to what has been discussed as well.
All excellent ideas. As volunteer managers, we're responsible to get the volunteer work done. It may be with person A, but person B or C might also be able to help you. You just need to tweak what you're asking from A to fulfill their vision. Find out the vision of person B, volunteers B, volunteer C, etc. But it's fun to think about these things when you're volunteering and managing up, and how to make this the most positive experience. With that, I will open it up for any other questions or answers. The questions can come from you, from anybody. The answers can come from within as well. Peer-to-peer problem solving is one of my favorite, but I appreciate you thinking about managing up. Like I said, it's a technique that I can use at work all the time. And don't tell my husband, but he's managed up very often.
I have a question.
Your secret's safe with us.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
At the beginning of the presentation, there was the question, what do you not like in a boss? And I think it was mentioned that micromanaging was listed several times.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean exactly? Because I think that definition, or I think that term, has been misinterpreted.
Does anybody want to give a go what you think micromanaging is? And please feel free to open up your microphones or put in the chat.
For me, I've been micromanaged, and it's, hey, I need this done by XYZ day. So maybe it's Monday and I'll give you till Friday, but Tuesday afternoon, how much did you get done? Wednesday afternoon, why haven't you finished this yet? It's,
So
well, I have it till Friday.
That's a really good example, because when they said, I need to get this done, do you have a deadline? Then that will help you with the micromanagement. We do a volunteer exercise on making peanut butter and jelly. Make me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. That's one way. Here's the jar of peanut butter, here's the jar of jelly, and here's a knife, and you have to run to the store and get the bread. Or here's the peanut butter that's made from peanuts. The jelly is made from grapes. We're going to open up the bag of bread. Take that out. You need two pieces. In one side, you're going to put about a tablespoon of peanut butter. And on the other side, you're going to put about a tablespoon of jelly. So here we go into these minor details to making a peanut butter and jelly. Where are you on the micromanagement scale? So if your boss is going to say, I need you to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but here first I'm going to teach you how to make the peanut butter and jelly because you're going to do it wrong. That to me is micromanagement, as opposed to I need 10 PB&J by Wednesday at 5.
And I would say it depends.
Absolutely.
because it's never about the person, it's about the task.
It's their agenda.
And if
It goes
they've never
back.
and if they've never made a PB&J sandwich, you're expecting a lot.
Right.
And so you don't want to overmanage and you don't want to undermanage. And sometimes supervisors, bosses, leaders, they're inspecting what they expect. So it may to you seem like they're micromanaging, but if you don't have the competency, but you do have the commitment, you may not know how to actually do this task.
So that's part of that preparation and part of the agenda, understanding why are you making these peanut butter and jelly sandwiches? Well, they're going to be served to the board of directors at their board meeting. So we're really nervous that they're not going to be done right. So I'm going to give you very specific instructions.
Exactly.
Whereas we're going to just give them to our kids at their break for an afternoon snack, and we're going to cut them into quarters, and they're not as picky because they'll just, they'll eat them so fast they won't even know what they are. It's understanding the agenda. That's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Understanding who you're answering to. If I'm giving them to kids for snack at 3 o'clock this afternoon, that's one kind of group, as opposed to giving it to their board of directors for their luncheon break. That's a different kind of group. So understanding the agenda, the outcomes, the audience, what you expect.
Yes. Yes.
All those are part of managing up, but to keep that in mind, I do a lot of meetings management in my work, and I'm just I'm just a stickler for how I set up a meeting, the prep that I do for the meeting, what goes on in the conversation, what the meeting minutes look like, because I know I'm trying to manage 12 or 15 other people in their knowledge on this committee. So that's what managing up is all about. If you know that, remember that if we talk about what their hot buttons are, my favorite personal managing up story was about 3 years ago. We have the 17-year cicadas here in the Washington area, and every 17 years there's this huge infestation of cicadas, and I was terrified. I've been through several of them. So the year before the cicadas were coming, I said to my husband, we're going to do a screened-in porch, and he said no. I said, wait a minute, you're answering a question without knowing any of the facts. So let's collect, what does it mean to add on a screened-in deck to your house? What does it cost? How long does it take? All these details. And so don't say no, because you're not saying no to anything. So we started doing the education, and we collected the data, and we found out how much it costs, and we redid our mortgage and stuff like that. And I can tell you, last year we built our new porch screened-in deck, and it's spectacular. But what my husband doesn't know is he was managed up on this, because he was saying no to a non-existent problem, or a non-existent, he had no information. And it's like, you can say no once we know what it takes. And once he found out, wow, we can do this, it will make a great improvement to the home. Okay, let's do it. And it's fabulous. I recommend it highly. But it was truly you were saying no before before there was a real question. A fellow volunteer manager of mine needed a storage area to hold all of her materials for her year-round projects with like 40 different sites around the area. And she went to her boss and said, I need storage. And the boss said no. And it's like, wait, he's saying no to something that doesn't exist. I said, you've got to go find out how much storage space you need, where you can get this kind of space. If you're going to rent space at a storage facility, what does that look like? How much does that cost? What's the commitment? Is it a year? Is it 10 years? Bring data to them, and then it becomes a real decision. And she did it, and she won. So managing up can get a lot of different things in a lot of different ways to you. So with that, any other questions?
we did have a couple other comments come in about the micromanaging, and these are going to be a little out of order, but I'm going to get to them all, I promise. So as we were talking, it was more kind of detailed and kind of went into the training. So I don't think we mean micromanaging as, use this amount and this side of the bread and all of that. That's into training. That's part of making sure a volunteer does the job correctly. So I don't think that's what we mean by micromanaging. But for a couple people, micromanaging is being control of everything and not wanting to delegate jobs or tasks out to others, making sure everyone is staying on task and holding them to it, but putting the additional pressure on them.
No, I still think that it's very similar, but as a professional, you need to assure your boss that you got this, it's under control. My favorite is when I had to tell somebody how we're going to run a meeting. And instead of saying, okay, we're going to have the meeting, I started writing the script. I started sharing the schedules with them to let them know how the flow of the meeting was so they don't have to be nervous about that. So part of it is understanding what your boss is looking for. Do they want all the details before the meeting? And in my case, the answer was yes. Do they want it verbally? Nope. They wanted it on paper and they wanted to see what it looked like written out. Yes, they're going to micromanage until they have confidence in your ability, especially if things haven't gone right in the past.
For sure. And there was just one other comment, and this kind of resonated with me too. Micromanaging to me is the director going over every step of the way you do things and changing everything. So it's kind of like almost wasting your time. Like, okay, you had me do this task, but really you just wanted to do it your own way. And Jared, I know you're typing, so I don't know if you want to unmute yourself and talk or.
Yeah, I loved what you guys said about prioritizing a meeting once a month with your boss. In my last work placement, my boss wanted to meet with me every morning. That's an absolute show of distrust. They wanted to micromanage every single element of what I did, and it's a waste of time, So that was one of the really early red flags, that they don't understand how to use volunteers. They don't know how to lead a volunteer coordinator, and they don't have trust for a person in that position.
So how long did the everyday meetings go? I mean, is it
until
years?
The pandemic started, which was the best thing that ever happened for that position. But yeah, it was a long time. I was in that position a year and a half, and it was just excessive micromanagement. And a lot of times a volunteer coordinator might be under HR and finance, and so you're actually having to meet with and keep multiple bosses apprised. So it became a major micromanagement issue.
And remember, your boss is never going to change, so you're not going to say, oh, we shouldn't be doing this. You can start, in my mind, thank goodness for the pandemic. That sounds great. And I don't know what's happened since if you've come back and if he's calmed down at all. But, I'm a big fan of Friday memos, meaning at the end of the week, I will report to you what I got done, what's been done, what still needs to get done that I'm going to be working on next week, next month, next year, that kind of thing. But to be able to report out to them more often, because obviously that they need that, but also hopefully they're not going to remember post-pandemic. But that would drive me bananas. I have worked with executive directors before, and my favorite was a new executive director who took a job until she found out that the old executive director was keeping an office right next to hers and coming to work every day. So it can happen at a lot of different levels and a lot of different reasons. And that's part of our managing up, is to understand who's going to talk to the person who's misbehaving, who has their own issues. It's not you. They have an agenda, and we have to figure out how to deal with it. Have they found you again every day, or they're not come back?
I got a new job.
And sometimes, right.
Sometimes you realize it's a bad fit. And so I realized that was just an indication of a toxic culture. There, they required you during your performance evaluations to list things you want your boss to improve on, which is a red flag. And one of the things I mentioned was I do well with leniency. I manage projects well. I'm never late on anything. So I would like a little less micromanagement. And that's when they started meeting me every single morning. And I was like, you're doing the exact opposite of what I expressed. It felt retaliatory. So it
Yeah.
didn't last long.
I'm sorry you had to go through it, but an amazing lesson you've
It
learned.
happens, right? Exactly.
And
Very good learning experience.
yeah, I mean, then what would you ever ask that of an employee today?
And I think that's really important. That informs my management style.
Yeah.
A lot of trust, but always open door if there's a problem. Come to me whenever you need support, but I'm not gonna babysit everything you do. I don't need to edit everything you've touched. Yeah.
And when you go to hire, there's a lesson that I would like to hear from my future boss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you can even tell that story about
Right.
why I'm at this point, what my agenda is. My agenda is I'm not going to repeat what was done to me in 2018 and say,
Right.
this is what I've learned. So this is what I'm expecting from you as a future employee. It would be, I think, I'm sorry you had to go through that pain, but I think you have a winning hiring process or a
Exactly.
winning story for a good hire. So congratulations.
Yes, this has been amazing discussion, and it is 11:31 or 12:31, depending on where you're at. So I
Yes.
just want to respect everyone's time, and this was amazing. This was probably one of the best discussion sessions we've had in a while on this series. So thank you so much again, Susan, and everyone who's contributed verbally and through the chat. I just want to do a quick reminder, our last session of the series this year, which is crazy to think that the year is basically already over, is going to be our very own Jared. Who's going to be talking about leading from identity on September 15th. So just here in a month. We're very excited to have him, and I'll send, of course, emails and follow-ups on all that information. So thank you all so much again. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, but if anyone has any additional questions, Susan, if you're willing to stick around for maybe a few more minutes, we can have that discussion as well. So thank you all so much again, and we look forward to seeing you next month.